Tapakaya Chadharmasya Sarvadharmaswarupine Tapakaya Chadharmasya Sarvadharmaswarupine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishna Te Namah Asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma mritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let us bow down to Sri Ramakrishna, the embodiment of all religions, the Supreme God incarnate. Let us pray to Him to lead us from unreal to the real, to lead us from darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge, to lead us from death to immortality. Sri Ramakrishna was talking to the devotees in the home of Adhar Sen, a great devotee. So he very pointedly said, discrimination and renunciation are the purifying agent. We have been discussing on this since 2-3 classes, how it is very essential in spiritual life. Discrimination strengthens your spiritual aspiration. It makes your life more stable. It makes your spiritual life more straightforward, so that you may not lose the track. There are 4 types of discrimination which in the last classes I have listed. One is Karyakari Viveka. What ought to be done and what ought not to be done. Every day you have to analyze and check yourself whether you are doing what should be done. The second one is Nitya Vastu Vivek. Discrimination between the permanent and the impermanent. What is permanent? What is impermanent? By discriminating this way, you will develop renunciation, which is very essential in spiritual path. Then comes Drigdashya Viveka, the discrimination between the seer and the seen. Then the final discrimination is Sad Asad Viveka. And what discrimination between real and unreal. So all these types of discrimination we have to follow. zealously. Each viveka strengthens you and leads you forward in your way of thinking. Last time we discussed about Nitya Nitya Vastu Vivek, this combination between the permanent and the impermanent. It gives us only knowledge of the transitoriness of the world and its enjoyments. But this discrimination itself doesn't give us knowledge of the eternal reality. Of course, what does it do then? It can take us away from the impermanent, but it can't lead us directly to the immutable Brahman. For this, we have to practice the third type of discrimination, which I am going to discuss it now. In the same way, it should be remembered that discrimination between the permanent and the impermanent should be practiced by a person who has already practiced the first type of discrimination, namely Karya-Kari Vivek, what ought to be done and what ought not to be done. And then Nitya-Nitya Vastu Vivek. Through that, a person will be able to attain equanimity and maturity of mind. Then comes Drigdrashya Vivek, the discrimination between the seer and the seen. There's a text, Drigdrashya Vivek, on this idea itself. There's a spiritual textbook available. You can read, very nicely dealt with. When the aspirant practices discrimination between the permanent and the impermanent with thoroughness, he discovers that though everything in the external world and in the mental world undergoes constant change, there is in him a region which doesn't change. It is the center of his consciousness, the seat of his I awareness. It is the notion of I that gives continuity to his life as an individual, in spite of his passing through the stages of childhood, etc. It's again the common denominator of all his thoughts and gives continuity and meaning to them. Just as a police constable who guides the traffic remains safe in his place, unaffected by the movement of vehicles, whizzing all around him. In the same way, the center of I consciousness remains unaffected by the thoughts and emotions spiraling all around it. This is the drik, the seer, the witness in us. The witness is called drik in Sanskrit. All the external and internal objects are drishya, the seen. Discrimination between the seer and seen is an important spiritual discipline. The purpose of this discrimination is twofold. In the first place, it helps the soul to detach itself from external objects and thoughts. It thus acts as a method of controlling thoughts. A better and more advanced one than the second type of discrimination discussed before. Secondly, it helps us in locating the divine center in us, which is the doorway to spiritual illumination. It points to the direction in which our real self, the Atman, lies. So the immediate goal of all spiritual techniques is to discover the light of the Atman, the higher spiritual dimension of the self. Drigdrashya Vivek cannot itself take us to this divine center in us. It can point out the way to it. By practicing it, we will know that our I is separate from our thoughts, but it cannot reveal the real luminous nature of this I. In order to discover our luminous spiritual center, we have to practice prayer, we have to practice meditation, we have to practice self-inquiry, nididhyasana, or any other spiritual technique. Even the Narayana Sukta, which I am chanting every day while worshipping Sri Ramakrishna, in that mantra it is very clearly stated that the Atman shines in the heart in the form of light. Positively it is said, it shines there. If you want to see it, you must become a yogi. That is, you must be well disciplined in spiritual practices. So that is the way how Drigdrashya Vivek, the discrimination between the seer and the seen, tries to discover the location of the divine center of the self. Then the last type of discrimination, Sad Asad Vastu Vivek, Sat and Asat. It is discrimination between the real and the unreal. Unless we have a direct supersensuous experience of the real, how can we practice discrimination between the real and the unreal? Once, Holy Mother was asked about the nature of God realization. She replied very significantly. What does a man become by realizing God? Does he get a pair of horns? No. What happens is he develops discrimination between the real and the unreal, gets spiritual consciousness and goes beyond life and death. Here, the Divine Mother is speaking of the highest type of discrimination, the highest type of discriminative awareness which dawns on an illumined soul. When a person has realized, then he clearly knows what is real and what is not. Why then do we hear so much about discrimination between the real and the unreal? This phrase is only a popular translation of the terms nitya and anitya, based on the premise that whatever is anitya, impermanent, is asat, unreal. As the world is impermanent, it must be unreal or illusory. A famous spiritual person, Sri Gaudapada, the Guru of Acharya Shankar, he has said in Mandukya Karika, again another wonderful text on Advaita Vedanta, there he tells, Adavante cha yannasti vartamanepi tattatha. What does not exist in the beginning and the end cannot be said to exist in the middle. Very nice statement. This is one of the foundational doctrines of Advaita. The other schools of Vedanta do not, however, accept it. According to them, the other schools, the world is no doubt impermanent, but that doesn't mean that it is illusory. The point on which all schools of Vedanta agree is that the true self, or Atman, is self-luminous. It is uncreated. It is immortal. It is separate not only from the body but also from mind. It is distinct from body and mind. So, these are the conclusions drawn by all the Vedantins. All the schools of Vedanta agree to these points. So, it is better to rename this fourth type of discrimination, Sad Asad Viveka, rename it as Atma Anatma Viveka, Atma Anatma. That is discrimination between the self and not self. It can be practiced only by those who have had a direct vision of the light of Atman. They only would be able to distinguish clearly what is Atman and what is not. The four types of discrimination we have discussed form a graded series, and as the aspirant progresses in spiritual life, he must take up higher and higher types. A true spiritual aspirant always practices discrimination. A part of his mind is constantly engaged in sifting, analyzing, classifying, and judging every idea and emotion that passes through it. Even while engaged in work, play, conversation, and other normal daily activities, the inner sleuth carries on his work. It goes on uninterrupted, even in sleep. Indeed, a disciplined mind, well trained in discrimination, acts as a guardian angel, protecting the spiritual aspirant day and night, and under all conditions and circumstances. That's what the meaning of what Lord Krishna said in the Gita. Uddhared atmanatmanam atmanam avasadayet atmaiva hyatmano bandhuhu atmaiva ripuratmanaha. When the mind is raised and purified through all this discrimination, the very mind which was responsible for one's downfall, the very mind becomes responsible for the upliftment of the soul. It becomes most trusted friend. Bandhu. Mind is considered to be your best friend only when it leads you towards God. If it leads you away from God, you should consider that mind as your enemy. So discrimination makes the mind behave like best friend. We love to have friends. That friend would be available in your own self. Why don't you develop good relationship with your mind? That is the purpose of spirituality. Simply telling, oh, I have taken the spiritual life 20 years back and nothing happened. This kind of grumbling will not take you anywhere. One has to know the process very well, adopt it properly, practice it thoroughly, intelligently, set your spiritual aspiration at the first place. Give first priority to spirituality. Then you will see how everything comes in your way. It comes like flood. You will be flooded by spirituality. That's the beauty of spiritual life. That's what when Sri Ramakrishna said, discrimination and renunciation are the purifying agent. How nicely, in a very simple but direct way, Sri Ramakrishna has given the instructions for us to follow. So to practice discrimination thoroughly, properly, it is very important you should be in touch with holy people, sacred books, and healthy discussion. All these things are valuable in spiritual life. page 508. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Sri Ramakrishna was seated in others' parlour on the second floor. Narendra, the Mukherjee brothers, Bhavanath, M. Hazra and other devotees were with the master. Arrangements were being made for Narendra to sing. While he was tuning the tanpura, one of the strings snapped and the master exclaimed, "Oh, what have you done?" Narendra turned to the drums. The master said to him, "You are beating that drum, and I feel as if someone was slapping my cheek." Referring to the kirtan, Narendra said, "There is not much rhythm in the kirtan. That's why it is so popular and people love it so much." Master, how silly. People like it because it is so tender and full of pathos. Narendra sang, "Sweet is thy name, O refuge of the humble. It falls like sweetest nectar on our ears and comforts us, beloved of our souls." He sang again, "O Lord, must all my days pass by so utterly in vain? Down the path of hope I gaze with longing day and night. Thou art the Lord of the worlds, and I but a beggar here. How can I ask of thee to come and dwell within my heart? My poor heart's humble cottage door is standing open wide. Be gracious, Lord, and enter there but once and quench its thirst." Master said to Hazra smilingly, "That was the first song he sang for me." Narendra sang one or two more songs. Then Vaishnavacharan sang, describing the grief of the gopis at the sight of Krishna as king of Mathura. "O Hari, how shall we know you now? In Mathura's royal splendor, you have forgotten us." Master, won't you sing that one? "O Veena, sing Lord Hari's name." Vaishnavacharan sang, "O Veena, sing Lord Hari's name. Without the blessing of his feet, you can't know the final truth. The name of Hari slays all grief. Sing Hari's name, sing Krishna's name. If only Hari shows his grace, then I shall never be distressed. O Veena, sing his name but once. No earthly gem is half so rare." Govinda says, "In vain my days have passed. No longer may I float here in life's trackless ocean waste." While listening to this song, the master became abstracted, saying, "Ami, Ami." He went into samadhi. The devotees were sitting around him, their eyes were riveted on him. The room was filled with people. The musician sang again. As he improvised new lines describing ecstatic love of God, the master stood up and danced. He himself improvised lines and sang them with outstretched arms. Soon he went into samadhi and sat down with his head resting on the bolster in front of him. The musician was also carried away with emotion and sang new songs. Sri Ramakrishna again stood up and began to dance. The devotees could not control themselves. They too danced with the master. While dancing, Sri Ramakrishna every now and then went into deep samadhi. When he was in deepest samadhi, he could not utter a word, and his whole body remained transfixed. The devotees danced encircling him. After a while, regaining partial consciousness, he danced with the strength of a lion, intoxicated with ecstatic love. But even then he couldn't utter a word. Finally, regaining more of the consciousness of the world, he sang again, improvising the lines. An intense spiritual atmosphere was created in Adhar's parlor. At the sound of the loud music, a large crowd had gathered in the street. Sri Ramakrishna danced a long time in the company of the devotees. When he resumed his seat, still tinged with lingering glow of divine fervor, he asked Narendra to sing, "O Mother, make me mad with thy love." Narendra sang, "O Mother, make me mad with thy love. What need have I of knowledge or reason?" Master said, "And that one? Upon the sea of blissful awareness?" Narendra sang, "Upon the sea of blissful awareness, waves of ecstatic love arise. Rapture divine, play of God's bliss. Oh, how enthralling!" Master said. And that one too, in wisdom's firmament. Perhaps it is too long. Do you think so? All right, sing it slowly. Narendra sang. In wisdom's firmament, the moon of love is rising full, and love's flood tide in surging waves is flowing everywhere. O Lord, how full of bliss thou art, victory unto thee. Master said, and won't you sing that one, the wine of heavenly bliss? Narendra sang. Be drunk, O mind, be drunk with the wine of heavenly bliss. Roll on the ground and weep, chanting Hari's sweet name. Fill the arching heavens with your deep lion roar, singing Hari's sweet name. With both your arms upraised, dance in the name of Hari and give his name to all. Swim by day and by night in the bliss of Hari's love. Slay desire with his name, and blessed be your life. The master improvised, be drunk with prem and weep, chanting Hari's sweet name, and be mad with divine fervor and weep, chanting his name. Sri Ramakrishna and the devotees rested a while. Narendra said to the master in a low voice, will you kindly sing that one? Master, my voice has become a little hoarse. After a few minutes he asked Narendra, which one? Narendra, Gaur, whose beauty delights the world. Sri Ramakrishna sang, describing the beauty of Sri Gauranga, Sri Chaitanya. Who has brought Gaur to Nadia? Gaur, whose beauty delights the world. His face covered with ringlets of hair shines like lightning against a dark cloud. Again he sang, this time about the grief of a gopi at her separation from Sri Krishna. I have not found my Krishna, O friend, how cheerless my home without him. If Krishna could only be the hair upon my head, carefully I should braid it then, and deck it with bakul flowers. Carefully I should fashion the braids out of my Krishna hair. Krishna is black, and black is my hair. Black would be one with black. If Krishna could only be the ring I wear in my nose, always from my nose he would hang, and my two lips could touch him. But it can never be, alas. Why should I idly dream? Why should Krishna care at all to be the ring in my nose? If Krishna could only be the bracelets on my arms, always he would cling to my wrists, and proudly I should walk, shaking my bracelets to make them sound, shaking my arms to show them. Down the king's highway I should walk, wearing my Krishna bracelets. The music was over. The master began to talk with the devotees. Master smilingly said, Hazrat danced. Narendra, yes, a little. Master, a little? Narendra, yes, his belly danced too. Pandit Shashidar's host had been thinking of inviting the master for dinner. We should stop here. Any discussion, questions? All the teachings of spiritual life seem to be easy, but seems to be difficult too. It's easy as well as difficult. It's easy when you take those ideas willingly, when you like them, then it becomes very enjoyable. But if you are half-hearted, then it becomes difficult. Oh, it's too difficult for me to practice, not probably in this life. So one person was telling, Swamiji, um, want to live a spiritual life, I want to become a monk, I want to realize Sri Ramakrishna in this very life. Everything should be possible by Guru's grace. Why can't you simply make it possible so that I can realize him immediately? Even though I explained to that person how it is very important to prepare the ground. Guru's grace is there. Sri Ramakrishna's blessings are there. All his teachings are available. Everything is there. But you have to make a little effort. Doing little effort itself is a sign of God's grace. Otherwise you won't even think in that line. You won't even think. So, when the idea was made more and more clear to him, at the moment it seemed as if he understood. Again, after some time, he would repeat the same question. Of course, he was opening up his heart and he was telling, oh, it's too difficult for me to give up attachment. I am deeply attached. So, towards my mother. So I went and stayed with her. So, what does it show? Even though he wants to live on a higher idea, even though he knows what is spiritual life and worldly life, still he is not able to give up the worldly ambitions altogether. And as is common with everyone, attachment. That only shows how attachment has become a strong samskara in that person. When it is so strong, you can't do anything. You have to make it, you have to weaken it. So the first need should be, let your God relation be there for some time. First you should think of weakening this attachment. Weakening. Then only you will be able to pull yourself from the grip of attachment. Anyway, every spiritual aspirant will have to pass through struggles. Will have to make lot of efforts. The struggle and effort depends upon the amount of vasanas or impressions one has to fight with. So build up good samskaras. Be more positive in your spiritual attitude and proceed on the correct lines in the spiritual path. Steadily, do it vigorously. Give first priority to spiritual ideas. practice these 4 types of discrimination which was explained at great length, then you will see how it becomes very easy. That's all. Any question, Mithilesh? Any comments? How do you overcome attachment? Because a monk telling to fight with attachment is one thing. A person living in the world, if he tells how to fight attachment, that is another way. So let us see how Mithilesh tackles this problem of attachment.
Well, everybody wants to be attached, but no one has succeeded so far. So I think there is no cause to fear or worry. I mean, life itself teaches detachment. That's the way I look at it. I'm yet to find anyone who has really succeeded in keeping oneself attached to anything the person wanted to be for all the time. So that's the nature of life. We want to be attached after, like Aurobindo used to say that, that suffering is the greatest teacher. So if you're too attached, then we suffer automatically at some point or other. Because things are transitory by definition. So what one can do? I mean, nothing.
No, one method is through trial and error. Learning through hard struggles and experiences. Another way is, people are suffering on account of attachment. You know how attachment leads to misery, everything. Then why can't you learn a lesson? Of course, it is very tricky. It's very, very tricky.
There was one philosophy, I think, in India a long time back, contemporary with Jainism, Ajivkas. And they believed that actually every form in this whole creation has exactly the same kind of life history. So nobody has any unique life, so to say. So if somebody is a monk today and seems very detached, the person has all his struggle before. It's just a question of time. If we had the access to total history of any one person, there is no uniqueness at all. In time, somebody is ahead, and in this temporal, so in some sense, we all have to go the same way. From the worldly point of view, somebody seems ahead, somebody behind, but actually there's no ahead and behind. It's just a question of time.
But it makes easy if a person understands the technique of fighting all these qualities which are obstacles in his life. That's why all these are classified. That is, in one way it's all true. In one way, everything will happen. That's a cosmic law. It will happen. Whether you like it or not, it will happen. How it should happen, accordingly it will happen. But the importance is that knowing these things, how some people not getting into that whirlpool of work for about 6 or 7 days. Then he began to pray, please take away. I don't want this now. Right now I've got so many other things. He's complaining. That means he's not ready. Even though the reality is shown to him, he's frightened instead of becoming joyful. So he's praying to Sri Ram to take it back. And then, after some years, then he began to repent. Oh, I should not have prayed like that. What a fool I am. Like that he is blaming himself. So, that is why Sri Ramakrishna tells, purify your mind properly. Then you will get the maximum benefit of spiritual ideas. The results also will come very nicely. It is true. By Guru's grace, everything is possible. But Sri Ramakrishna himself tells, we should not make it like a miracle mongering. Oh, Guru will do everything. I will keep quiet. So, no. Guru will help you. You should struggle and work yourself. Thereby you enjoy more. With a child, Sri Ramakrishna himself gives the example of a child trying to learn walking. It falls down, gets up, falls down. But mother gives the hand, he holds the hand, tries to walk. Slowly, slowly it walks and it smiles. When it falls down, it weeps. Like that, then it learns to walk by himself. It's exactly like that, spiritual life also. So we are passing through all types of pleasant and unpleasant experiences in the life. And if you have good association, you will learn through these experiences and you can avoid many things. You can take preventive measures. It's not that you should get the disease and then take the drug. Some disease you can avoid. So, how to do that? That Sri Ramakrishna has given wonderful instructions in the Gospel. Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna is full of instructions only. Turn to any page, there will be instruction. So, what is needed is how much I should practice, what idea I should take into my life, and you must dedicate yourself to that idea and live the life properly. Living the life properly is very important. Build up your good samskaras. Then you will see everything will come to you. All glory, everything will come. It will come, undoubtedly. But in the meantime, we pass through a lot of depressions, all sorts of things, etc. That's because of our imaginary fears and doubts and unexpressed desires. All these things are responsible for making miserable. So if you are really aspiring for the experience of the highest reality, you must follow this discrimination. Karya Karya Viveka, Nitya Nitya Vastu Viveka, Drig Drishya Viveka, Sadda Sad Viveka. Thank you.